Greetings and welcome to the Hourlings podcast project. My name is Martin Wilsey and I'm your host. Tonight, our topic is about books about writing. A lot of us buy books that help give us tips on how to write better, faster, more effectively, topic-based stuff. So tonight is going to be all about the books that we have found completely useful in our writing. Excuse me. Sorry.
Bless you.
So we'll go around the room a little bit, and I guess I'll start. Do we want to go around one at a time, or you want me to do my whole list? How do you guys want to do it?
Well, I'd say just book.
Let's do like one book at a time and just keep going around.
Okay, sounds good.
And then we can comment as necessary.
Mm-hmm.
I'm actually going to start with a book that I could not find in my library. I was like looking, so for show and tell. And one of my favorite books that I really, really have found to be very effective is called How to Write Science Fiction and Fantasy by Orson Scott Card. Now, the great thing about this book is that he is like right on task on things you got to do if you're going to write science fiction and fantasy. He tells you the important things about world building. He talks about story construction, how to actually, once you get down to actually writing your prose, tips and tricks and how to do a good job. And he even goes into some of the business end of writing science fiction and fantasy. So that's my first pick. And I'm mad because I couldn't find it in my library. I must have loaned it to somebody. That's how much I love that book. So, Jeffrey, you're next.
Thank you, Marty, my good friend. Well, folks, today I'm going to recommend one of the more important books in my writer's catalog, which I do keep here on my phone, The Emotional Thesaurus. In fact, this is a whole series of books, which I will discuss the other books later, but I wanted to bring out the first one because this is perfect for the show, don't tell. Telling me that that person is sad is not as good as describing their eyes watery or their mouth curling down or maybe shivering from sadness. And so this book gives you that nice reference that you can just look up an emotion and it'll give you all the action words that will describe what that means and how that person might be reacting physically rather than just describing an emotion directly. And in fact, I'm reading a good book on emotions, so this does dovetail nicely with this book that I'm reading for the science book club thing that I run on Sunday. That is going to also be about where emotions come from. So I will recommend to you, the writer, The Emotional Thesaurus.
I also own that book. And it is a very handy book.
And so do I. And it's helped to diversify my writing and help me get emotional nuances across better in my characters. So I second or maybe third that recommendation.
Dave, go next.
Okay. This is kind of the big kahuna for a lot of writers. This is Stephen King on writing. It's a very curious writing book because it's not so much about writing as it's about Stephen King's, he calls it a memoir of how he was formed as a writer. And so it's a memoir and he's telling stuff about his life, but only really as it relates to writing. And he gets into how he got ideas, how he put things together, how he's done certain things with his books. It's a fascinating journey for a writer, and there's a lot of things in there for other writers to learn from. It's a really fascinating tour de force and probably one of the best writing books ever.
Yeah, definitely every writer needs a copy of that, and it's really good stuff. Shay, what's up?
It's helpful to go last in this list because I can very conveniently fourth all of those recommendations. I also have all the books so far that you guys have mentioned. I'm sure as this list continues to go around, I might not be able to say that, but I do have all three of those so far, and I do like them a lot. And I'll probably add a book to the list that you guys also have. We might be starting with the basics here. The one I'll throw in is The Elements of Style by William Strunk and E.B. White, which is a cute little book, at least my copy is, very pocket sized, and it just goes over the nuts and bolts of writing, including grammar and sentence structure, and things that I think might seem small at first, but are necessary to push yourself to the next level of writing, so that your first drafts have less and less of those very common mistakes that you might see. So I recommend that book just to get your basics down, to master the fundamental levels of writing, and then go into the theory of writing and learning some other more complex topics. So that's my recommendation.
Indeed,
I still
that
have
is-
my copy that I got when I was in college.
Mhm.
Yep.
I might have stolen mine from a previous employer.
And I will just say that is indeed Zuckerman's famous book.
So, so my next book on this list is another book I couldn't find in my library. Damn it! And actually, this one's a little bit different. Title of the book is Art Matters by Neil Gaiman. The interesting thing about this book is that I believe it is actually a compilation of 4 or 5 essays that Neil wrote about making art, and including writing. And it is, I really love this book. I really encourage everybody to get a copy of this book, but it's mostly because it's inspirational. It's not like a, how do you do this thing? It is inspirational about why you should do it. And I highly recommend it as a book about writing.
Art Matters was actually a speech, a commencement speech.
Right. And in fact, the speeches that he wrote, I think it might have been, they could have been all speeches, now that you mention it. It's been a while since I've read it. And, but it's speeches or essays about it. And in fact, I'm sure that if you had really good Google Foo, you could probably go out and find videos of all the speeches that are contained within it.
Yeah,
But
that particular commencement speech is actually pretty amazing.
yes, very amazing.
New York School for the Performing Arts or something like that. It was, it's available on YouTube if you look for it.
Yeah. So, but get the book too. You can buy a used copy really inexpensive. So Jeffrey, next.
Right. This time I want to bring up good old Save the Cat. Save the Cat is originally a screenwriting book, and there's a version for novelists as well. But it teaches you how to get those great beats that drive a plot. And that is what I took out of it. And it helps me to just focus my writing to say, here's where I need to go, how I need to get there, and how I move on from there. And I cannot recommend this book enough. It is a very handy book.
Yeah, that book really is like a roadmap book. It's a technical, this is how you do it, nuts and bolts, as opposed to Art Matters, which is an inspirational story. But yeah, yet another good book. Everybody's got to have that one.
And I'll third that. I actually, when I do my outlines, I'm usually following one of the Blake Snyder beat sheets. He has several different variations.
Yes, he does. I've seen it.
Yep. So, David, it's your turn.
All right, my next one's going to be a little bit odd, but I've enjoyed this book a lot. It's the 101 Habits of Highly Successful Screenwriters. So I cut a lot of my teeth when it comes to writing by studying screenwriting. This is interesting because they took 14 of the top screenwriters around, people who have written not 1 or 2, but sometimes 3, 4, or 5 movies that everybody on here has probably heard of, right? And they asked them all kinds of questions about every of being a screenwriter. Now, the thing is, the questions that they ask, yes, they're talking to screenwriters, but they're also, a lot of them are general writing topics as well. Like, where do you get your ideas from? Or how do you set up your working environment so that you can write? And then they'd give a selection of the top responses from the various screenwriters for each particular question. So It's a fascinating book. You get in fairly concise form. You can look up whatever topic you're interested in and then see what a lot of expert writers have done to kind of make progress in that particular topic area, whether it's generating ideas or finishing a second draft or just believing in yourself or whatever. So it's screenwriting, but there's a lot of stuff in here for the prose writer as well, and I highly recommend it. The other thing that's nice about it is you can just pick it up anywhere and start reading and find some interesting nuggets that are, I find, very helpful and or oftentimes inspirational.
By the way, I'm going to put links to all these books in the comments below. So that was the first book that we've talked about that I don't own. And I'm sitting here like writing this down.
Yeah.
There will be more.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Get your copies.
That's right.
Yeah. I love the overlap between screenwriting books and novel writing books. I encourage you to not even hesitate as far as, would this apply to, why learn anything from this? I'm not a screenwriter, or even screenwriters, and vice versa. So I totally agree with David's suggestion there.
Well, it's helped me to write tight. And it's helped me to write tight scenes. And
right, and dialogue. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm gonna try what Jeffrey did and see if I can show the cover on my phone. See if you can kind of, no, it's too bright. Well, this is Hooked. Yep, this is my next suggestion. So it's Hooked, and I'll read the subtitle. Write fiction that grabs readers at page 1 and never lets them go, by Wes Edgerton. And this is one of my favorites. Again, it's a really small one, pocket size. Maybe that's my thing. But it is great because it's focused. It's a very focused book on writing, just about beginnings. Beginning a novel, beginning a chapter, beginning a sentence, and being able to grab the reader right away, and different methods that you can do that without being redundant. It tackles the dreaded prologue that we've already talked about in previous episodes. But yeah, I like it a lot. It's very sort of like Dave was saying, it's one of those books you can pick up and just read a page or two here or there, and you get some good tips. It's nothing super meaty or super like you really have to study it like a textbook. Very readable, very breathable. And I'm all about beginnings. I think most of us are, and really hooking the reader, as the title says. So I recommend Hooked if you haven't already read that.
Okay, so my next selection, actually, I couldn't decide between these two books. So I'm just gonna show them both. They're both about outlining your novel, and take off your pants. You know, tongue in cheek, they're both got really good technical explanations about using outlines as a tool. I'm a big planner, so I love to be able to refine my outlining techniques. And both of these, they use slightly different methodologies for how to develop, refine, and utilize outlines for your writing. But I recommend both these books, or either of these books. They're really great. Jeffrey.
Right. Well, unfortunately, I do not have this on my phone. I have it in the traditional form, flipping pages, but it is somewhere in this house. I do not know where. It is the J. Michael Straczynski's third edition of script writing book. What was it called again? Well, anyway, his book on script writing, which he goes through how to write a script for a radio play, how to write a script for a screenplay, how to write a television script, and all those things. It's technical stuff in terms of format and how you present it. It's not telling you how to write, but it's not telling you how to write a story. It's telling you how to convey the story. And while that isn't necessarily what we do as writers full time, it is something important, because you got to know your medium, and you've got to know, if you're going to write a radio script, how that's going to look, or you're going to write a screenplay, how that's going to look. Or as a novelist, well, it's not in that book, but he is a novelist, and he does talk about novel writing as well. So I do love that. It's the first writing book I ever got, and I'm feeling sad that I do not know where it is, but it is out of print, and I don't know if he's ever going to come up with a fourth edition. But if you can find it, keep it, because it's a classic.
Okay, David.
All right, so this one's going to be a little bit different, and I have a couple of variations on this as well. This is Madea, Harlan's World. This was a project that was put together by Harlan Ellison, a famous screenwriter and short story author and also novelist. Basically, they got the top science fiction writers, the hard science fiction writers of the time period together, and they had a symposium, and in front of an audience, they got together and basically designed a world. And then they had a couple of the writers, notably Poul Anderson, do some hard work to further define the world. And then they all wrote stories in the world. And the authors are people like, little known people like Frank Herbert, the author of Dune, Poul Anderson, Frederick Pohl, Larry Niven, Robert Silverberg, a lot of the biggies of science fiction. So you get to see a bunch of great writers, because the content of the symposium is in the book, as is the world building details, as are the stories. So if you want to write hardcore science fiction and learn about world building, the masters are at work in this book. It's hard to find, but it's eminently worth it. And then the variations on the theme, a similar book was put together by Robert Silverberg a few years after that. And another one called A World Named Cleopatra. This is by far the weakest of the three, but nevertheless, it's a fascinating world building exercise as well. And this one has only like 4 stories, I think, that were defined in that world. It goes a little bit off the deep end, so it's not as successful as the other ones, but there's 3 books on hardcore science fiction world building with stories and the hardcore world building details. A lot to learn from.
Go.
All right, my third one you guys better all have. I'm gonna be very mad if you don't. My third one is by Liz Hayes, our group leader, our group chieftain, and it's called How to Write Faster: Strategies for Planners and Panthers. And so again, this is the book that the woman who leads are the Hourlings wrote. And I genuinely, I mean, I know like we all, like it's a bias, whatever, but like a genuine plug for this book. It actually has really helped me. I love it because it totally validated for me something that I was experiencing as a writer who early on could write a first draft in like 2 weeks. And then as I kept writing and kept writing and kept learning more, I slowed down a bit and I was writing like 1 book a year. Sometimes 1 book every 2 years if it was a challenging manuscript for me. And I was like, geez, what happened to me? And this book is all about validating that when you learn more and know more, sometimes it actually slows you down. Some writers it might speed up, but a lot of times it can slow you down because you're a critic of yourself. You're able to see what you're doing. You're a little more conscious of what you're writing. And so I loved that validation, number one. And then I love that she has some great mottos and some great exercises that you can do to speed up your writing. If you're like me and you're getting into that rut, it's very colorful. It's very fun to read. I'm a visual learner, so it's very visual. It's it's a little different, but that is my genuine plug. I think it's a great craft book. You guys agree?
Yeah, I also have that book.
Cool book.
And strangely enough, I do too.
Yeah, and Liz also has a really cute book on very beginner's Python. So if you want to learn a programming language, she's got you covered.
Cool.
So my next book, speaking of writing faster, this book is the one that started this whole topic, because I read this book a couple weeks ago. It's 2000 to 10,000 by Rachel Aaron, and the premise of the book is she has a very simple technique in here on how to simply write more words per hour. So it's really interesting because I took this to heart. I took her advice, and my average writing speed, has been about 1,800 words a day for my writing. And using her techniques, I suddenly went up to over 5,000 words in the same amount of time, which is the significant part. So This is a good one, and it's actually really short. And if you read it, it's like only 100 pages long, including the front matter and back matter. She states in here it all originally started as a blog post that she wrote about how she started writing a lot faster. And the techniques in there are actually incredibly simple, and I am going to start adopting those big time to use. So it's a good book. It's a good premise. I have already derived benefits from it.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah, and I'm looking forward to reading it myself. Thank you, Marty. Okay, now me. I did bring up the thesaurus books, the Emotional Thesaurus. There's another one in this series, one of many books. In fact, there's a book on urban life, rural life. There's a book on positive traits, negative traits, but this is the one I want to give you, which you probably can't read, but this is the Emotional Wound Thesaurus. And that's all about trauma, because you as a writer may have some things that have made you a writer because of you've been through a trauma. And granted, you probably can describe that for your particular trauma better than anyone. But there are many things that you might not have experienced. And what better way than to have a resource that can talk about people who have experienced these things and how they might react, neglect, or abuse, or physical abuse, or rape.
Yeah, a family member being murdered.
Yeah, exactly.
War-based PTSD. There's a lot of
Exactly. And so this will help you as a writer to convey the true aspect of that person in terms of their actions and their reactions.
And let's face it, how many of us are actually writing stories about perfectly well-adjusted characters anyway? So really useful for us.
Yeah. So David.
All right. This is another screenwriting one. This is Lou Hunter's Screenwriting 434, sort of an advanced screenwriting book. What I like about it, again, when I was first writing stories, I was really concerned about structure, Act 1, Act 2, Act 3, inciting incidents, how things related. There was a lot of discussion in there about scenes and sequels. So one scene where something happens and sets up something else to happen in the scene later on. Echoes of dialogue from one scene to another one, et cetera, et cetera. This book talks about just about every kind of structural issue that you can really come across when writing a screenplay. But guess what? All of those things he's talking about also apply to prose stories as well. And I have just found it to be a pretty concise and really usable book. And it's one of those books that helped me, I don't want to say master, because I don't think anybody really ever masters structure, but it certainly took me quite a ways down the road when it came to structuring my stories.
All right,
Jay,
my fourth one, I do. I'm as long as you guys are going, I'm going to keep up with you. So here we go. My fourth one is going to throw a wrench at this whole, screenwriter versus novel writing book thing. I'm going to surprise you all and say my fourth one is video game storytelling. So we're talking about video games now. This one is What Every Developer Needs to Know About Narrative Techniques by Evan Skolnick. And while the title suggests that the book is maybe written for people actually designing and developing video games, I read it and found that it was super applicable to writing novels as well. I think in this podcast, I've been the most ardent advocate for video games as like one of my inspirations for storytelling, as examples of brilliant storytelling. And this book really captures the whole, put the player right in the middle of the action, give the player these sort of options, give the player these sort of problems, and you're going to have a really addictive, in a good way, and compelling video game for them to get immersed in. So it's a whole immersion, it's a whole active protagonist, strengths. I think one thing that you might hear a video gamer say who is not so much into movies or books, which would be like, well, why aren't you into movies and books if you like video games? One thing that they might reply is that, video games, they involve you in the story. You become part of the story. whereas other modes of entertainment are more passive. And so I found it really interesting that this book focused on bringing the reader into the story in such a real and active way. And while you can't literally tug your reader into your pages, you can get really close. And I think video games are a really interesting way to try to model off of doing that. So I recommend right in between there, not a screenwriting book, not a book writing book, a video game writing book for really great storytelling.
Well, that does remind me of a literary genre, which is not so popular today, but the choose your own adventure books.
Yeah.
Or as
right.
they call them in the UK, the find your fate books.
Oh my.
Turn to this page. Now, if you choose this, turn to this page. But if you choose that, turn to that page.
I love those
Sure.
books. When I was a kid, I love those books.
I have some of them. In fact, they did a series for a while that were set in the worlds of various science fiction writers like Heinlein, Starship Troopers, David Drake, C.J. Cherryh.
Weird. Good stuff.
Oh, yeah.
Well, I've only got one more that I want to toss out there, and this is a little bit more than just about writing. The interesting thing about this book, it's about writing and it's about critique groups. And the great thing about this is not only does it show you, it has chapters on how to create a writer's group. And it has very, very, very good advice on critiquing for plot, for character, for settings, for dialogue, description, everything as you go through here. It even has worksheets and stuff about how to do that. And because I believe that writers groups are a very, very important tool for the author to use, this is a really good book if you want to build a writers group that is an effective team. Right.
And I will remind our viewers that if you go back to our archives, we did do an episode, which I believe I hosted, on how to run a writing group. You might want to call back to that.
So, Jeffrey, you got another one, or are we done?
I'm sure David has more. I'm sure David has more.
I'd have to go. I used my last one that I pulled out. I'd have.
Yeah, the thing is, I pulled out a whole bunch. I know we're not going to go through all of them.
All right, Marty, you get the victory then. Us having more
Marty
votes.
wins.
Well, the weird thing is I'm sitting here writing down. I don't have Hooked. I'm going to be buying that one. Probably the how to be an effective screenwriter title. But we'll be collecting all the URLs for those. But I'll be one-clicking some stuff in Amazon after we're done here. And
that's my goal. My goal is to make you spend money, Marty.
I know, and that's what that is.
So mean.
Is a really effective technique for me to find.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, I got all these friends that will go out and read these books and bring me the excellent ones that
filter.
So I don't have to weed through the ones that are weak and awful, which I have a whole bunch of them that I'm not going to talk about.
Yeah. Just saying, Mo books. Give me the books.
So now it's making me want to go through my library and start organizing my stuff because I can't find anything.
Your library's not alphabetized?
Not since I moved in here.
I thought you used to be an IT guy.
Yeah, it was in the old house. I had my son when he lived with me. He loved alphabetizing stuff, and
I did that to my father when I was a kid. He was not the kind of guy that kept things straight. So I think I was 10 years old. I came up one day from the basement. I told him I'd alphabetize his library so I could find books. So please don't mess up my system.
I remember
that's exactly what happened in my house. Well, that's good.
I was up in Minnesota once, and I went to Uncle Hugo's, a really great bookstore up there in Minnesota, in Minneapolis, and they do keep series, but even the series are not in order; they're in alphabetical order, which I thought, that's a little weird, but okay, if that's the way they do it, it's alphabetical all the way through.
Well, mine's alphabetical by author, I should add.
Yeah, alphabetical by author, and if it's a series, then it's order of the series. Should be.
Should be.
Hey, libraries, it could be a whole nother topic.
Oh, Dewey Decimal.
Another
Oh.
night.
Good one.
So any
Mm.
closing words?
Well, I think the biggest thing is there's a whole bunch of resources out there to help you as
Yep.
a writer. And they're more common and more available now than they were like when I first started writing way back years ago. So we've given you a bunch of good selections, but man, find the ones that work for you. They're out there.
Absolutely. And I'll say this, that a lot of the examples we've given you are narrative, which is good. I mean, even Save the Cat, it's a narrative structure. But the emotional thesauruses and the other thesauruses, those are great resources where, especially on the Kindle app, like I have there, I can just look up the thing that I want and I don't have to read the other matter right at that time. I only need what I want and I get what I want.
Cool.
My history professor once told me something that just changed my life. And he said, read for argument, which implied you don't need to read the entire book. Read to know what the argument is, grasp the main pillars of what holds the argument up, and you can get enough of the book. And so I don't think it's realistic that you're going to read cover to cover all of these books, right? We're not saying to be a great writer, you need to go read all these books and study them and take notes.
Right.
But read for argument.
I did.
Oh, sure.
I mean, a lot more than these.
Yeah, right.
Well,
Read for argument and refine yourself with good books, and you're on your way, kid.
yeah,
Cool.
good advice.
Well, thanks again for watching. It's another good
Yeah.
episode. And
Finally
we'll
structured
see you
episode, my
next
friends.
week. Take care.
See ya.